Welcome. Welcome to the Trap Music Museum. Good evening. So happy to be in conversation with George Galbreath around his solo exhibition, Urban Landscapes, The Bluff, Retold, Reinterpreted, and Relived.
Thank you so much for having me.
I don't feel like I had a lot of choice, but thank you. So looking forward, not that it took any choice, very, very happy to be here. So thank you all for being in attendance in person, but also thank you guys for joining us virtually online. We appreciate it. And if you haven't had the opportunity to see the exhibit in person, we hope that you are able to make it out and check out the work, but we will talk a bit about the work tonight. It is open through the end of the month, and our closing reception is next Thursday, May 25th, next Thursday. So 7 to 9 p.m. next week. We hope to see you there. So with that, George, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes. So I'm George Galbreath, and I am a high school art teacher. I'm very proud of that fact. I've been teaching for 20 years now, 18 of those at Westlake High School. Shout out to the Lions who are graduating right about now. I am a practicing artist. I always tell people I have 2 full-time jobs because after teaching all day, I go home and I work on my artwork. I went to Howard University for undergraduate in a BFA in graphic design, and the technical world could not hold me. So I think being in the classroom and right, yeah, amen. Yes, I think being in the classroom offers me all the creativity and excitement that I need, and really try to push the students to be full-time artists that they can be.
So my name is Esohe Galbreath. I am married to George Galbreath and have had the wonderful opportunity to immerse myself in the Atlanta art community and the art world over the past 12 years that we've been married. Prior to that, my background is engineering and finance. I worked in logistics and operations for 12 years. So 12 seems to be that magic number, but our marriage is gonna last much longer. And I found myself overworked and underpaid and underappreciated and wondered what I might want to do with my time and my talents. And I had a friend ask me what I already found myself doing for people for free that if I never got paid for it, I'd continue to do. And so I am the daughter of a serial entrepreneur and creative, my mom, and she was my first client. And I've been helping her since I was about 14 with things like break-even points and taxes and all those things that creatives often don't like to deal with. When I married George, it was a lot of the same. But as he has welcomed me into this art world, I've also been blessed to get into some curatorial spaces and some other things. So had the opportunity to curate this wonderful exhibit alongside him and very proud of the work that he did. So thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
So first question, urban landscapes, what is it?
So I initially wanted to be an architect. When I found out how much math was involved, that was not going to be an option. I think a lot of artists definitely came to that conclusion. I've still been drawn to structure. I love rendering perspective. I love rendering buildings, monuments, anything that has like form to it that I can kind of work with on a 2-dimensional surface, but in a 3D way, right? And bridges actually is one of those. Like I love rendering and looking at bridges, right? But the idea of urban landscapes really came from the concept of plein air painting in a natural space, like, you know, by a lake. But that's not me. I don't like bugs and I don't like nature. But rendering in the city, rendering in the hood, like that's a whole nother type of experience. You get to network and experience the people in the community, and painting those structures, drawing those structures live was where I found my passion. And I've been working with urban landscapes. Gosh, I guess as long as we've been together. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
So your urban landscapes are often really colorful. With this particular exhibit, the Bluff, we don't necessarily see a lot of color in the Bluff. How did you marry those two things?
Color is the way I express myself to the world, right? Being a teacher, I am a optimist. Even during the pandemic, it was a little hard, of course, but I hope and pray that things are better, right? I remember when you and Sharon Dennehy curated a show called Halcyon Days. Is that what it was?
At Notch 8?
Yeah, and the idea of better days. That's what my art color, or that's my color represents in my artwork. It does not matter how dark or how dilapidated a building or how empty a space, life is brought to it by color and through color. So when I paint utilizing color, especially with urban landscapes, which can sometimes have a darker quality to them or a heavier feel, it's more digestible. Like people look at it, and even if they don't appreciate the subject matter, they can still say, "Oh, that's beautiful," and hopefully they see a little bit of it the way I see it through my lens. Yeah.
Thank you. So this particular exhibit is all around the Bluff. Can you tell us how that came to be, like as a topic, as a location, as a locale?
Well, we live in Castleberry Hill, which is right in the heart of downtown, or I guess it's called South Downtown now, right? Um, but the Bluff is it's a neighbor, it's a neighborhood right beside Castleberry. And even though we didn't know a lot of the history, um, we've seen the current. Like, we've been driving through the Bluff for years now. We've been living in Castleberry about 8 years.
I think it's 9.
Gosh,
I think
time
we've been
flies.
living there 9. But I think one of the things we like to drive through the Bluff. One of the things that I find interesting are the names of the streets, right? So you can go down Martin Luther King Drive, you can go down Joseph E. Boone, you can go down Brawley. And it made me wonder who these people are and how often could you go down main thoroughfares on your way home and they all be named after these amazing Black pioneers and people. Yeah. But some days the traffic on North Side is just bad and we drive through the Bluff. But there are other days where it's a bit more deliberate.
Yeah, and one of the things that I felt like was, I don't know, it's this dynamic. The introduction to the Bluff for a lot of people was Snow on the Bluff. Call it a documentary, call it a short, but that film spread through the internet like, people overseas saw that. And it is sad to think that people that had never experienced that community, that was their first introduction to it. Any of you that are not familiar, it was a sad scene, like lots of drug use, gun violence, and bringing a certain reality to it. But, as far as we know, there was definitely some fictional components in there, but that's not all the Bluff is, and that's not all it was. So we attempted to show some depth to it.
Can you tell me about the process in getting ready for the show?
So it's difficult, right? All of us are from somewhere. That's the place we know. We know it, to our heart, right? And I didn't want to disrespect the community by coming in 8 years in and saying, "Oh yeah, I understand the Bluff." I don't. This could be part 1 as far as I'm concerned. The research that we did, I felt like was pretty thorough. Got some great support with that. So Auburn Library, going through and finding information and books, text about the community. Joe Stu, we were able to find 3 or 4 individuals that have actually lived in that community, grew up in that community, raised families in that community. And we did some really awesome interviews. Thank you for that, sir. barbershops. Like I got some information from the barbershop, like, in the Black community, that makes sense, right? And I got some really strong, passionate feelings about not only where the Bluff started or that community started, but that transition and the progression has been through. And where else did we get any other information?
The reference images was an important
Oh, the
component.
reference images. So shout out to Chilio, amazing photographer that rendered or took I think 4 of the photos that we referenced in these pieces. And then also shout out to Artemis Jenkins, also amazing photographer that took us through the Bluff, walked us through the community, taking photos that I was able to reference for my imagery. Yeah.
Yeah. And so with the interviews, I think one of the interesting things that we found, because we kept asking if they referenced the area as the Bluff, when did it come to be? Like, how did it come to be? And a lot of it was that the Bluff was probably less of a place and more of a time. And so when you were having those conversations and interviewing certain people, they had never referenced, they lived there, but it wasn't part of their reference. It wasn't part of what they knew. And so can you talk a little bit about some of the differences in these images between what was probably the Bluff and what was a different space or time in the same area that's known as the Bluff?
Well, let's go to the map for that. So the vibrant map behind you borders and identifies the area that we know as the Bluff. It's been consolidated and condensed a bit, but some of the more popular or significant or even infamous streets are listed on there. And based off of the research, there's areas that have moved and changed and gentrified and all kinds of stuff, but MLK being the south border, Northside Drive being the eastern border, on the west side, Joseph E. Lowry, and then of course up north, Old Bankhead, as we all know it, right? But in doing that research, and I did lose track of the question, my bad. Sorry, can you help me?
Yes,
Sorry.
just the difference in the pieces that represent the Bluff as we currently know it,
Okay.
and possibly what was the same area at a different time.
Yes. So thank you. I appreciate that. So what was interesting about our understanding of the Bluff being a space and time or an area that had gone through a certain transition was that we could see what was there today. We could see what has like been like that scenery in that space, dilapidated buildings, in some cases, abandoned properties. But what we did not see is we had never driven by MLK's home, and it's still on Sunset. And I was surprised by that, being somebody that's not from Atlanta. This even though I've been here, 18 years? No, yeah, 18 years. I have never driven by that house, but it's still beautiful. And it still shows the relevance and significance of that time, right? Like this is what that community was anyway. However, seeing the transition as you drive down that street, you get a taste of what that community has experienced for decades also. You know what I mean? Yeah, please.
But I would say that we have driven by that house, because one of my favorite streets to ride down from top to bottom is actually Sunset. So we've driven by that house. We didn't know the story of the house.
That's right.
And didn't recognize what it was, but it wasn't that we hadn't seen it. And so I think often we're in spaces and we're in places and we don't see and we don't take the time to see.
This research was amazing. Like with that, like I had a great time. Like we drove the Bluff more times in these recent months than we have since we've been in Atlanta.
So can you talk a little bit about leaving your studio space as you were working on the exhibit and now finding a new path to come home?
So one of the stories that one of the interviewees told us, and you can actually listen to it on the audio over there, was about the drug epidemic and how areas of the Bluff, late at night, it would be the party after the party. And you would have people that really are part of a community there because they knew oh, like this is where we all going at 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. And I mean, you knew those little streets, but when Esohe and I'm driving through there, it feels like a maze, you know? And she talked about the drug use and literally people ODing and just business as usual, people just moving on and like living life, or, you know,
literally walking over the body.
yeah,
Like the body would be there and the people would continue on.
And that, even though it's sad, like it's still somewhat there. When I was driving, when I leave my studio at Echo Street and Guardian Studios, and you know, I was spending some late nights working on this show, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, and so he told me stop driving through the Bluff at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. But I needed to do my research, right? Like you would see the shadows, you would see people coming out of abandoned properties, folks talking to themselves, folks, you know, high, homeless, like, you know, like just a range of different characters and people, you know, and it's still present, you know. Now I know the area is changing. I know the amount of money that's about to be dumped into this area is going to displace a lot of people, but seeing that firsthand, like even from my car, was it was scary, you know, it was sad.
Is that, I've heard you say this before, but I just want you to share with the audience. Is that why it's important for you to capture that moment in time, right? So in capturing what is currently there, depicting what is currently there, illustrating it, can you talk a little bit about why that's important to you from an urban landscape perspective?
Absolutely. And moving to Atlanta was, I mean, it was ordained. You know, Atlanta is a fast moving, changing city. Like you snap your fingers and a whole street is gone and redeveloped, right? And one of the things that I've tried to do since we lived in Castleberry is represent different structures as, you know, honestly, as they're being destroyed and as they're being rebuilt and refurbished, you know. And yeah, like I know that some people will not be sad to see the Bluff go. I do understand that, but the community that's there has to be respected and remembered for a plethora of reasons. But yeah, I definitely want to document even this little bit that we still see. Yeah.
Can you talk about, this is one of the first times that I've ever seen you work in a variety of medium, or to mix the media in the way that you did. Why now? Why did you decide for this particular show? Why the boldness in choosing the different mediums?
Driving down Lowry, there is a property that I have no idea who owns it, but there were like 3 large units there. And over the years, I've seen it literally down to a pile of rubble now. And I knew that the structures were falling down, you know, but they're literally piles now, right? Like literally there's 3 big piles, and there's brick in that pile. There's old wood in that pile. There's dirt, you know, barely any grass, but, you know, nonetheless, these textures, they demanded that I do something different with the pieces. So by working on paper, our mentor, Kevin Cole, always says, like, you know, with paper, you can be a lot freer. You know, you can like just really express yourself. You know, canvas kind of sucks you in, and, you know, you start doing things that you feel like are going to cost you money. But but he says paper is cheap, you know, even this expensive paper, right? But in working on this paper, I was able to go a lot more free and experiment with those textures to represent that brick, to represent that wood, to represent that age. And it allowed me to kind of show like the instability of some of these structures, while at the same time still showing the heaviness, you know. But I enjoyed it. You know, the pastels was definitely different for me. Even though the color definitely worked out, the texture of it is a little raw, and I appreciated that for these pieces.
And what about the ink pieces and the watercolor?
So that's still going back to my traditional self. I mean, like I started off illustrating. I love to draw, right? and ink lets me get into those details. I kind of get lost in it. But it was fascinating when Artemis took us out for these shots. Do you remember the title of that piece in the middle? Is it
293.
Thank you. 293. Sunset?
Sunset.
See, yeah, Sunset keeps coming up. Sunset is a street. But we've been by their property so much, and I've never like walked around it. You know, like Artemis took us like and got different vantage points of that property that I had never even considered. And it was exciting to view that property through his lens. I think that was probably the part that was most interesting about collabing. And Chilio in the room now. Thank you for coming out, sir. I'll speak on it right quick. This piece right behind the Esohe is actually, you know, that's her favorite, right? And Chilio took this photo, and I'm gonna let you talk a little bit about it if you don't mind. But this photo allowed me an opportunity to capture like 4 or 5 different materials and textures in one piece. And that's not something that, you know, I'm not a photographer. I wouldn't have saw that vantage point that allowed for that. And it gave birth to the piece, you know, and I appreciate that. Can you tell us a little
You
bit?
mind me passing you the mic for a second? You just telling us about the piece.
Thank you. Well, congratulations on your piece. And thank you for the Trap Museum for having my people up in here. Appreciate you. But yeah, Curtis Snow, they solicited me to do a photography for his book that he wanted to release after his movie success and so on and so forth. And I didn't know that guy was the mayor back over there in the Bluff. Like he literally has like a philanthropic cause back there with helping that community, piggybacking on what you were saying. And as we were walking down, he was giving me a tour, and everything's true what you said. We walked through abandoned buildings. He gave me a tour of the Bluff, and not this specific piece, but as we were walking through the abandoned place, I noticed there was a huge young adult homeless problem. There were like teens and young boys sleeping in these abandoned bandos, these abandoned units, and it was probably like it was freezing out there. Like, you know, this guy had like maybe 4 or 5 covers on him, sleeping on an old couch. And as we left that unit, he's like, "Get up, man. You know, it's like your life, you know, basically your life passing you by. You can't sleep all day. You got to do something with yourself. Like you're young, you know." Like he got up. The kid got up, and I guess he went on about his business to do whatever he's going to do. But when I saw that unit right there, I was like, "Let me get a flick of y'all up here on these steps right here," because I was just like, I know for a fact that because I met the dude that brought a lot of this community up with Carolyn Carr and Michael Gibson, because they were going to build Stevie Williams a skate park and me a bike park, and then they wanted to, in the middle, they wanted to build like an art gallery. So I met the dude, and as I was walking down the street and I was like, sit right here, I was just like, it just reminded me back home where I'm from. It's just sheer poverty, you know? It's just like third world poverty back there. And I know that building wasn't going to be there forever because I know the people who's buying all this stuff up over here. And I just wanted to document that interesting building right there, because like the roof was all ripped off, and it's like they kind of seamlessly floating in the middle of the building because the steps look like it's not going anywhere. It's like infinity, you know what I'm saying? It's like, where's it going to? Like the whole roof is ripped off. And I just got a lot of respect for Curtis Snow back there after he explained to me about how they're displacing elderly women and women that have been there since forever by raising the taxes, redlining. For these private, they're paying almost more money in taxes than they're paying for their actual mortgages and stuff like that. So I just got a real wake up call about the Bluff and just all the socioeconomic issues that's going on back here. So I'm glad like you chose that photo. And the other photos is just I don't know what made me take a picture of the memorial with the teddy bears. Yeah, because that's just a problem that's just all too common in our neighborhoods. And then on top of that, that Simpson Plaza, you're on Simpson Road, so you see that sign. Right?
Yeah.
That's like a landmark. That's going to be out of here soon. I guess, So, and somebody told me like, Chili, you need to go ahead and start taking pictures of all these landmarks because it's not going to be here anymore. And I just can't believe that they're removing these beautiful structures and putting up these prefabricated. I guess I don't know. What do you call this style? Brave? They putting up Switzerland? Like, oh yeah, Switzerland with this design? Yeah, I don't know, man. But it's just so much history and character in these buildings. And I know like up north where I'm from, initially they preserve all that antiquity. So I'm trying to understand why they're not doing it here, you know what I mean? So it's like I'm just glad you picked those photos to to keep that area alive or whatever and tell your story.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
Thank you very much for sharing, and thank you for allowing and even sourcing the images, because I know you took those images a while ago. And so just to even go through the work and to be willing to share those images so that George could reference them is appreciated. So switching gears just a little bit, there are a couple titles that I found to be really interesting.
Okay.
And I'd like for you to talk about those pieces and explain the meaning behind the title. So one of them is One of a Few, and the other is One in 1,000.
Yeah, so those are the brick pieces, literally. Some people have actually been asking, before they look at the title, what that piece over there, like, the larger one is, but it's 1,000 bricks. It's literally 1,000 bricks. And the three pieces beside it here are kind of brick samples, but like look like brick wall, right? The idea came from when we were actually doing our interviews. One of the gentlemen that we were interviewing was speaking to literally like 1 in 100 kids getting out, 1 in 100 people getting out the Bluff, like just speaking to how hard it is to overcome all the challenges in that community. And I was sitting there talking to H period, I period. And, he was saying he spent some time over there and hung out with some folks. And in his experience, it was not 1 in 100. It was 1 in 1,000. Like he was like, it's not even giving enough credit how hard it is to overcome a certain level of poverty, to overcome a certain level of challenges, like things that literally like almost like holding you back. And I started thinking about how some of the most challenging environments and communities have produced some of the most amazing people in our community. I mean, folks that like perseveres, folks that are ridiculously strong, folks that are ridiculously talented, folks that basically like rise to the top. And I started thinking about them as like that gold brick, that one gold brick that you found in the hood, right? And I think we can all agree there's a whole lot of talent that goes by the wayside because of a lot of those challenges. But that person is able to escape all that, escape the trap, right? Like that's it. It's kind of mind blowing. So these three right here, speaking to one of a few, that's the gold brick amongst the other, like hard, like heavy, dark experiences. That one person that makes it out. And if you can look, gosh, I actually lost it at this point. I think it's top left on that 1,000 bricks. I took a gold leaf and actually put it over top of one of the bricks. So that's that 1 in 1,000 that was able to overcome. And this level of symbolism is a little bit beyond what I typically do. But it felt good. Like it felt good to experiment with that. I may actually revisit that some more. But yeah, still kind of represented some of my color in there anyway, you know.
And I don't know. So you say that you don't necessarily delve into symbolism a lot. I think it's usually small and hidden. So in a lot of George's artwork, what they call them, the Easter eggs, like in the movies and whatnot, they're Easter eggs. And at some point, like I would love to just have an explanation of all the Easter eggs and where they show up. But a lot of times within the pieces, there's something that's there and you may not see it initially and you might have to look at it quite a few times. I think this is a bit more in your face, but then you're left wondering, like, what does it mean? Like, what's the brick? What's the gold brick? Or what's the one in a few or one in 1,000? But that was awesome. I do want to talk a little bit about the interview component and what that turned into, because for me as a part of this project, the interviews were absolutely my favorite piece, right? Finding out about the people and the stories, because again, I think the biggest lesson learned was that the Bluff wasn't a place. The Bluff is a period of time, but it also had to do with this group of people. And so can you give us some background on the interviews and then I guess the synopsis of interviews or the product that was put together to kind of share with the audience? And then Joe, if it's okay, I'd like for you to share a little bit too.
So one, Joe like pulled this off seamlessly, right? Like, because all this was an idea. I knew that as I continued to do these solo shows, I wanted to think outside the box and appeal to people's senses in a different way. You know, I'm big into color, so like that visual component is something that I really focus on, but I wanted to give people another opportunity to learn about what we learned about in doing the research for this show. Civil and Human Rights Museum definitely has an amazing installation where you're able to sit at the counter of a kind of display and arrangement and put on your earphones and you hear people shouting, telling you to get up, you know, stop protesting, terrible things, right? It's moving, it's emotional, right? And I think even the chairs like kind of shake on you and like, you know, it's a little scary. That audio component was something that in the back of my mind, I really did want to incorporate into one of the shows and didn't know how we were going to do it, but I basically just spoke.
God for smart freaks.
Right. You know what I mean? So, you know, we spoke to the right person and Joe provided all that we needed in order to come up with an audio component that went really, really well with this show. So when you put on those earphones, you hear snippets of interviews with the individuals that we did the research with, that we basically interviewed for this exhibit, all from and lived in the Bluff. And then there's audio, like I just told Esohe, I was like, I want to hear sounds of the Bluff. You know, that sounds like another album, right? But nonetheless, I was just thinking of all the things you would hear in the Bluff. Like, you know, you might hear your dogs barking, kids playing, people shouting. You might hear the ding at the door at the corner store. And I was just like, y'all want to hear all this in that. And like I said, like that's all we provided for Joe. And he was able
Joe
to
made
put this
magic.
together. Yeah. So
Will you tell us a little bit about
Joe,
your project
please.
and your thoughts?
Yes.
Please.
First of all, thank you for welcoming on that skill set. I've known you two for a long time. You guys have been great inspirations in my artistic endeavors. But yeah, all you told me was I want to hear the Bluff. I want to hear the environment sounds of what you would hear. And I think that was one of the things the interviews led us to that, because when you heard certain aspects of what all of these interviewees went through, you can automatically hear the Bluff in the sound and the soundtrack in the background. You can hear the ding from the bookstore that used to be there, or the tire screeching from, you know, a late night run, or, you know, somebody may be outside at a late night or something like that. And I actually, one of the pieces of advice that I took from you was I went out there and field recorded some, you know, just walking down the block. Like, what does it sound like? What does it, and there are some quiet nights on the Bluff. So, that's something I think, was definitely translated in this, but everything that you heard was kind of like visually embedded in all of this artwork. So I thought that was awesome. And I got a chance to see it from the start.
Yo, right. I actually was curious, like, how did you decide to piece it together? Like, cause that, I mean, I don't know if you just felt it or what. It almost sounded like a soundtrack.
Yeah,
know what I mean?
definitely. I used both of your notes as guidelines because one thing, even though the details of the vision wasn't as worked out, the end result was there. You both were very clear, like this is how we wanted to come across. So we started with, this is how I came up in the Bluff. I was born here, or I moved here for college, or my family moved here from outside of the outskirts of Atlanta. This is how the Bluff was when I came up. And they were all different versions of the same thing. It would and just like you said, it wasn't a location, it was a time. And you had late 90s, 2000s time, you had early 80s, 90s time, and then you had a 70s time. And all of those time frames were coexisting in that. So I felt it was very necessary to tell their start all the way to what they would like the Bluff to look like now.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe.
So definitely before you get out, folks, you got to listen to that. I mean, it's a work of art, it's a work of art to listen
Definitely
to.
a work of art. From the interviews and the research and the Auburn Research Library and the images, what was your favorite, I guess, memory from this exhibit? And it could come directly from the work. It could be from one of the interviews. It could be,
We didn't even put it in here. The story of Squirrel. Okay, so Squirrel was this seemingly drug dealer. And I want to say it might have been during the 90s, but it was during the 90s. And there was a local police officer that worked that area, this area, the Bluff, right? And I mean, he basically wrote his memoirs. I mean, maybe 11 chapters, but 3 of the chapters dealt with Squirrel. So Squirrel was elusive. I don't even I actually forgot what Squirrel's real name was.
But the reason why they called him Squirrel was because of how quickly he could dip and dodge and how well he knew the Bluff.
Exactly. And there's a pattern in our community for kind of glamorizing or kind of looking out for the criminal, like, what I mean? Like I think in our community, we have people that represent all sides of the drug epidemic. Like, I've got cousins that have sold dope. I got cousins that have done dope. I got friends that went to prison for a certain period of time. But when I heard Squirrel's story, it didn't seem like I don't know, it was entertaining and it was interesting. And I wanted to know more. And so I was reading these chapters and we were at the Auburn Library. And one night, late in the Bluff, they tracked down Squirrel. They finally getting ready to catch him. And they cornered him and he disappeared. And I'm looking at these streets and I'm like, yes, he definitely disappeared, because I'm looking at this and it's confusing. And if you don't know it, you was going to get lost, even as a police officer, right? And they track back through the same properties over and over again. And they're like, where in the world is he? So this dude that's writing the book gets separated from his unit, and he's walking through this house for the 3rd time, and he hears something in this deep freezer. A deep freezer wasn't even working. It was just in one of these abandoned properties, and he opens it up and Squirrel's inside hiding.
And he had been trying to get Squirrel for years. And I think a lot of times, George may read something or he may watch a movie or whatever, and I just want to know what happens. Just tell me what's up. So as he's reading, I'm like, well, what happened? I'm hoping that Squirrel doesn't get caught. I just want Squirrel to make it.
Yeah, and it's wild because I can envision that. When I'm looking at some of these properties and some of these areas, there's a familiarity. in different parts of the United States, depending upon where you grew up, there's some similarities to this community. And yeah, Squirrel almost felt like a family member or something.
And it's
You
funny,
know,
at the end of all of this, you don't remember the name of the police officer, but you remember Squirrel.
right. Yeah.
One of the most interesting things to me, like I asked, like, how did the Bluff become the Bluff? Like why it wasn't, there were projects around the Bluff, but there was no project within the Bluff. So like, how did the Bluff become so notorious? How did the Bluff become an area that police wouldn't go into, that ambulances wouldn't go into? Like, why was this the way it was? And I think one of the interviewees, and it's possibly two, we came to a hypothesis, a strong hypothesis, that it was because of the map-like structure of the Bluff. And I think in that moment, the idea for the map was born, because it does look a bit like a mousetrap. Like if you guys have played the mousetrap game and set it all up, like that's what it looks like. And trying to get in and out, you had to be especially familiar with it. And a lot of times people who came to arrest or whatever, they weren't nearly as familiar. And so to be able to get in and out became a thing. And so the Bluff as an area, I don't know if it was by design, but you look at those streets today and it's still hard to get in and out. It's really easy to end up at the end of a street and there's no outlet there and you don't know which way to go and which way to turn around. So imagine in, I guess, units where police officers are often trying to get out. Like if you were assigned to the Bluff, like how long do you want to stay assigned to the Bluff? So you're trying to get out of the Bluff, but after you get out of the Bluff, then who knows how to get in and out of the Bluff now?
Yeah.
And so it just got to the point where people wouldn't go at all. So I want to open it up to the audience now, if that's okay, for questions, and we can just pass around the mic. JB, and I'm gonna ask you to use the mic. So we can...
I got it. So one, beautifully done, just beautifully done from top to bottom. From the start, just realizing that you still were really an outsider, you know, and like humbling yourself to be able to connect with the community. I think that's real critical. And I think it shows like all of the energy that you all were able to connect with is translated, you know, and I think people can feel that when they see the work. That being said, I'm wondering, like, you all just did the collection, like you did a book featuring your collection. Have you thought about maybe turning this into like a audio visual experience? Like, could it be a book? Like, that's how I'm seeing it. I'm looking at him like, yo, this is a book. And you can translate, you can transcribe those interviews and then have a QR code or something where people scan it and then they can listen to it as they're reading through. You feel me? Yes. Like I want that book. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? So it was more of a comment just than a question, but like, or like, when is it coming out?
you might have to work on that book, sir.
Hey, I'd be happy to.
So the Galbreath collection book, which is available on our Instagram and on Amazon and on our website, Galbreath. Yeah, the web galbreathcollection.com. galbreathcollection.com. It was the hardest thing we've ever done. Like in 12 years of marriage, it was the hardest thing we've ever done together. And we've done a lot. So this book gonna have to wait. But one of the things that I do appreciate about what you're saying is what better way to pay homage to this community, right? And actually probably all the communities we depicted. Like, I mean, this was unique and interesting, right, in a different way. But the Urban Landscape series spans the globe, honestly, with some of the renderings that I've done over the years.
Definitely.
Yeah.
But thank you for the comment. Yeah. And one, like, there are an abundance of great ideas. And if we could just figure out how to have a little more time, we would act on all of them. But the last time somebody said that should be a book, we did it. And it was really,
thank you. Really thank you for that moment. So,
but you got us thinking. You got us thinking, and we appreciate it. Yeah. Any more questions or comments?
I echoed Mr. Jonathan's comments about how beautiful this exhibit is. I especially love that painting over there. That's my favorite. Question. So It sounds like you had a lot of choices of which photographs to paint. Why did you choose this particular photographs?
So what I'll say is Chilio and Artemis, their visions, in this case had to overlap with mine too, if that makes sense. Even though like truly, in my opinion, as photographers, their experience with these locations was separate. It's their works of art on their own. Like the photographs are works of art, right? But once I'm able to take those, I have to like feel a connection with it. Almost like if I was like going through a photo exhibit of their work, right? Because like Chilio had, I mean, I can't even imagine your catalog, like thousands, gosh, of photos, right? Artemis, when we went out for the photo shoot, he had a whole downloadable album for us to choose from, right? But as I was going through those galleries of that work, these were the ones that attracted me. And with Chilio's, he was able to kind of narrow it down for us and really focus in and hone in on these certain images. But the one thing I did appreciate about them is once I looked at these photos, it felt like I was there. Yeah, because I actually wasn't at these shoots, right? But these photographs made me feel like I was like present. And I think that's why we were drawn to them. Yeah.
Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, I just love how you brought light to the community because it's so dreary over there. I just love how you brought your color palette selections, which you spoke on earlier. Like, I just love how you shifted the energy of the community. Because I used to actually work in the Bluff with the Head Start program on Kennedy Street at the church over there. And like, they always used to be like, Mr. Mitchell, be careful going out there. Because, I used to have to wear a suit and all that. And, they probably thought I was the police, like old police, you know how they talk, you got to go knock on doors to try to recruit children to come to school because the school was empty when I got there. And so within walking distance is a free schools, the Head Start program. But I was able to fill the school up. I was only 26 years old when I was working that job. So I was, so just, and then, I sell clothes. So I used to sell clothes to a lot of the trappers over there. I used to hustle clothes on MLK, Philly's finest and Mr. Everything. So I went from that extreme to that extreme, right?
Yeah,
so I've had plenty of experiences in the Bluff, and it's just beautiful with your color selection, man. I just wanted to just commend you on that. That's really all.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah. Please. Yeah.
I wanted to ask, piggyback on what you just said. It was intentional, all the bright colors. That was an intentional decision to use the bright colors because you talked about how, there was always a struggle, a lot of crime and misery, but in all the paintings, they are all bright colors. So it was an intentional decision that you made.
Yeah, we don't watch horror flicks around our house, right? Like you can't like even turn on a scary movie, right? And I think another thing, Esohe says she's been through so much in her life, she does not need to watch a horror flick. Live that, right? And one of the things about this vibrancy, this brightness is bringing light to, like I said, some dark streets. Like driving down through the Bluff at 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. Yeah, I mean, there's no light. You know what I mean? And I think this light is a certain amount of optimism. In one of the series I did, we were talking about gentrification and just the negative connotation, right? But in one of the documentaries that we watched, all the people kept saying was, yeah, just hope one day this all changes, right? And I know that change happens in a whole lot of different ways. But yeah, someday in the Bluff, regardless of what we even envision for it, kids are gonna play in a safe street at some point.
Right.
At some point, a new house is gonna be built. At some point, a family is gonna smile. Now, what that looks like, we have no idea. But happiness, it's a thing, and it's gonna return to some of those dark experiences. Yeah.
Was there any thought while you were doing this to include people? Because I know that there are no people, because in this
Yeah.
picture right there, which is that painting right there, you left out the two guys that are standing on the steps. So that was intentional.
That's a good question. Yeah. Now I include people in places. To me, we live, right? And we die. Like we move on, like we age, we are forever a part of a place. For me, when I see structures, I see the people, but I never paint them.
You never
I never paint them.
really?
Yeah, like when I see these homes, like it's almost like spirits, you know what I mean? Don't get me wrong, like that person might still be there, but like the spirit of that person, that family, is momentary. It's like the Bluff. Like the Bluff is a period of time. It's gonna be gone at some point, but representing these structures to me represents a certain timelessness. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. Anything else? Well, I want to thank you all for coming out. I want to thank the Trap Music Museum for hosting us. I definitely want to thank Adela, the curator of the space. I don't often work well with everybody, and I worked well with Adela. So appreciate her support, the way that she showed up as we got this exhibit together. Again, the closing reception is next week, Thursday, May 25th, 7 o'clock. We'll be here. Additionally, just to thank the photographers again. So Chilio, Mr. Omar Mitchell, and Artemis Jenkins for lending their talents to the project. It made the project that much stronger. I think George spoke to what he may not see if he was responsible for the reference images and what they were able to see. And Joe, you added a whole nother dimension to the project. So I thank everybody who was a part of that. And thank you and shout out to DJ Set the Saint and Stage Wing for recording this. We've done a few artist talks at this point, and I think this is the first one that we've had recorded, and so that it can live on. So we appreciate you for that. Thank you all. We'll be around for a bit.
We will be here. Wine is over there, and audio is over there. Help yourself. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you.